to log on? Hello, Ashley, can you hear me?
Can you hear us, Russell?
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, Ashley, has everyone had a chance to log on from the public?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Good afternoon. Now I'd like to call the Caswell County Planning Board meeting to order for January 25th, 2022. I've been fighting what I thought was a sinus infection over the last few days, but it turns out I was exposed to someone on Friday that has COVID. So out of an abundance of caution, I wanted to attend remotely today. So thanks for bearing with me. We'll have the approval of the agenda. Has everyone had a chance to review the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. Hearing no feedback, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I make a motion to approve. Second.
Okay, Mr. Oakley, was that your motion?
No, it was Steve.
Okay. We've got a motion by Mr. Harris and a second by Mr. Daniel to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Next, we'll have the election of the chair and the vice chair. I'll now entertain a motion to open the floor for nominations for chair.
I nominate Russell Johnston.
Okay, was that you, Mr. Harris?
Correct.
Okay, we've got a nomination for Russell Johnston. Any other nominations? Okay, hearing no other nominations, we'll close the floor for nominations for chair. All those in favor, please let me know by saying aye for Russell Johnston for chair.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. The motion carries. Next, I'll open the floor for nominations for vice chair.
I nominate Scott.
All right, was that you, Mr. Foster?
I nominate Scott Oakley. This is Tony Foster.
Okay, we've got a nomination for Scott Oakley by Mr. Foster. Any other nominations? Okay, hearing no other nominations, we'll close the floor for nominations for vice chair. All those in favor of Scott Oakley as vice chair, please let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Scott Oakley is the vice chair. All right. Next, we'll have public comments. Mr. Hoagland, do we have any public comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, we did not receive any signups for public comments today.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hoagland. So next, we'll have the approval of the November 2021 meeting minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? Okay, hearing no feedback, I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes for November 2021. And for this, if we could do a roll call vote, please. And I'll start with Mr. Foster, yes or no?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Oakley?
Yes.
Mr. Daniel?
Yes.
Mr. Richmond, are you present?
No.
He is not.
Okay. Mr. Petit, it looks like Mr. Michael Petit just came into the meeting. Mr. Petit, we're taking a vote on the minutes for November 2021. It's a motion to approve. And I just need a yes or no from you, sir.
Whether you approve of the minutes.
So you have to. Yeah, approve
Okay, thank you, Mr. Petit. All right, the motion is approved. And next we'll go on to new business, the Briar Ridge Major Subdivision. The chair recognizes Mr. Hoagland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can everyone hear me okay? Mr. Chairman, the Briar Ridge preliminary subdivision before you contains a proposal for 11 new lots along the public gravel street named Pascal Road, which branches northwest from US Highway 158 West and Locust Hill Township. All major subdivisions, as you may know, all major subdivisions which are categorized as those containing 7 or more lots must receive approval from the planning board in accordance with section 8.7 of the Castle County Unified Development Ordinance. As required by the ordinance, the developer and surveyor have conducted a pre-application meeting with the planning department and submitted a sketch plan to the planning department. They have paid the necessary fees associated with the review and have submitted the necessary number of preliminary plats for the board's review. And for those of you who received this document via email, you should see several copies of the plat in paper on the dais as well, 18 by 24 copies. In my capacity as subdivision administrator, I have found that all lot size, right-of-way, plat layout, and other requirements have been met on the plat and am recommending approval of the subdivision. As you review, please note that section 8.7.4.2.3 of the UDO gives the planning board the following options. Option 1, you may approve the plat as it is. Option 2, you may approve the plat with conditions. Or option 3, you may disapprove of the plat. And there are appeals processes and other processes upon disapproval. Any of these determinations must be made within 45 days of initial consideration today. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about the proposed subdivision.
Thank you, Mr. Hoagland. Is anyone there to speak on behalf of the subdivision?
No, sir. We don't have anyone here. I know that the surveyor who conducted the plat, Mr. Boswell, I believe is feeling under the weather. That would explain his absence today. He said that the property owners may or may not appear in order to answer any questions. I told them it was not required for them to appear. And so I believe that they have just elected to not be here today.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hoagland. From your perspective, does the plat maintain all of the regulations pursuant to the UDO?
Yes, sir, it does. And if I may note, there's one interesting feature of this plat that may have stuck out to the board member as well. And that is you have a really unique situation in that you have a major subdivision along a public street, but that public street is gravel. Most public streets obviously are paved and in the maintenance schedule for NCDOT. And so this is something that we carefully considered. At first, I thought that NCDOT's signature and certificate for approval would be needed on the plat. But the preliminary plan that I mentioned, or I'm sorry, the pre-application meeting that I mentioned that took place was conducted with myself, Mr. Boswell, the surveyor, and Jason Julian, the representative from NCDOT. And if you look at note 6 on the bottom left-hand side of the plat, it basically clarifies that an extension of the right-of-way in either direction on Pascal Road will be dedicated to NCDOT. It will be folded into their maintenance schedule, and then whenever NCDOT deems appropriate at some future date, then the road will be paved. So I know it's a really unique situation that you have a major subdivision along a public gravel road, but that was probably the most complex aspect of this, if you will. And even in that, it still meets all the requirements of the subdivision.
Thank you, Mr. Hoagland. And the reason it's before the planning board is because it's more than 9 lots subdivided. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. More than 7. 7 is
More
the
than 7. Okay. Okay. All right. So if it were 7 or less, then it would be a minor subdivision.
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. Any questions or comments from the board?
Yes, this is Tony Paulson here. One question, do we know why Duke Power is going overhead, power line versus in the ground.
I'm not sure why, as you can see on the plat, it says Duke Energy overhead, power lines. I believe those are just existing lines. And one of the requirements in a plat layout of this nature is to recognize any existing utilities that may transverse properties.
Okay,
Are there any public comments, one way or the other? Any public comments, one way or the other?
Is that a question for me? This isn't really the type of issue that would necessitate a public hearing. This is really the first time that this subdivision would be before the public at this meeting today.
okay, any further discussion? Okay, considering that we've heard from Mr. Hoagland in that the plat meets the UDO requirements, I will go ahead and make a motion to approve the preliminary plat for the Briar Ridge subdivision.
This is Scott McQueen. I'll make a motion that it be approved as is.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Oakley. Do we have a second?
Second.
A second by Mr. Harris. And again, we'll take a roll call vote. Mr. Petit, yes or no?
Approve.
All right, Mr. Foster,
Yes.
Mr. Harris,
Yes.
Mr. Oakley,
Yes.
Mr. Daniel.
Yes.
Is that Mr. Richmond in the middle?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Richmond, thank you, sir. All right, the motion is approved. Next, we have the Watershed Review Board, and the chair will recognize Attorney Bob Hornick.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. Bob Hornick here down in Chapel Hill. And I guess I'll cut right to the chase here. After spending the last 72 business hours in constant communication with counsel for all the parties, and given the unavailability of one party that we found out about this morning, we've determined that it's best to continue the hearing at the request of the appellants and their counsel to our next meeting. Given there's litigation going on regarding some of the claims that are involved in the appeal. One of the parties who apparently is visually impaired was not able to make it today. So after consultation, including with Matthew and with the chairman, it was determined that the best course of action and the one that's safest for us procedurally would be to continue the hearing until the February meeting, at which time it might be continued further depending on the status of the litigation now going on in Person County Superior Court. So I guess at this point, Russell, should we have a motion to confirm that we're going to continue the hearing until February 22nd?
Sure, Mr. Hornick, and just to clarify, without jeopardizing the attorney-client privilege or any confidential communications you had with counsel, is it fair to say that all parties feel like the majority of the issues will be disposed of in the judicial process through the Superior Court?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the case. I mean, in the Superior Court, especially any issues having to do with the high impact development ordinance, with the moratorium and the vested rights claims are the main focus of that litigation. You know, it's still within the Watershed Review Board's jurisdiction to handle issues regarding the issuance of the watershed permits, but it's all wrapped up together, and taking care of it or trying to handle it piecemeal seems to be a bit cumbersome. So the best interests of all parties, I think, including the Watershed Review Board and the county, is to continue the hearing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hornick. Any questions for Mr. Hornick? Okay. Hearing none, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the continuance based upon the council's recommendation.
Mr. Chairman, if I may weigh in here, the importance of continuing to a date certain is an important part of the process. If the board does not name a date certain, and Mr. Harper mentioned at the very next planning board meeting, which would be February the 22nd.
Yes.
If the board does not name a date certain, then the county has to undertake the burden, including the financial burden of sending mail to all of the appellants, all of the client, or all of the agents representing the appellants, and all of the neighboring properties subject to the neighboring properties subject to the appeal property as well, which is quite an undertaking in terms of staff time and financially. So that's the importance of postponing to a date certain.
That's exactly right, Matthew. It's administratively and financially for the county, economically, it's best to continue to a date certain, and that thus the request to continue it until the February 22nd planning board meeting date.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hoagland. Thank you, Mr. Hornick. So with that being said, I'll make the motion to approve to continue the Watershed Review Board hearing until February 22nd.
Second.
All right. Is that Mr. Daniel? I'm sorry.
Tony Foster.
Mr. Foster, I apologize. We have a motion and a second by Mr. Foster to continue the Watershed Review Board hearing until February 22nd. We'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Petit, yay or nay?
Continue.
Okay. Mr. Foster?
Yes.
Mr. Richmond?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Oakley?
Yes.
And Mr. Daniel?
Yes.
The motion's approved. We'll move on to planning department updates. Mr. Hoagland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really only have one issue, and this is the same one that I brought up at the November meeting. In light of the appeal, the watershed appeals, perhaps we can make a little bit of a scheduling determination here. But as you may recall, the planning board is tasked with reviewing the county's comprehensive plan on an annual basis, but that really got bumped from our agendas last year as a result of the appeals. And so I really just wanted to inquire with the board if you wanted to go ahead and put that on the February agenda and prepare to review and make any kind of comments or recommendations on the comprehensive plan for next month.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
And to that end, I will continue to be in touch with the attorneys representing the appeals. And what I assume will be the course of action is we'll move the planning board meetings back into the library until we have an appeals hearing in which a large number of appellants or other interested people will be in attendance, in which case we can schedule to have it back in here. But if it's going to be a relatively small meeting, I think if it's okay with the board, I think having it back in the library is probably the best course of action.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hoagland. Any other updates?
No, sir, that's all I got.
Okay. I'd like to thank Ashley Powell for sending me the remote link and putting everything together logistically to make this happen. And I'd like to thank our planning board attorney, Mr. Hornick, for attending, and thanks for all the board members attending as well. And thanks for bearing with me today. So with that being said, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
All right, motion to adjourn. Roll call vote, Mr. Petit,
Yes.
Mr. Foster,
Yes.
Mr. Richmond,
Yes.
Mr. Harris, Mr. Oakley,
Yes.
Mr. Daniel.
Yes.
All right, motion's approved, meeting is adjourned. Hope everyone be safe. We'll talk to you later.
Good afternoon, everybody.